Hey guys, tonight we climb aboard something you've probably never imagined. A luxury tour bus that could pass a hospital's health inspection, yet cruised silently under the neon haze of every major city in the world. You stand at the foot of the steps, staring up at a sleek mirrored exterior that reflects the flash of paparazzi bulbs like falling stars. The door opens with a quiet hiss, airtight. Inside, you're not in a tour bus. You're in a world where nothing is allowed to touch him unless it's been wiped down, filtered, steamed, sealed, or double-checked by someone wearing gloves. The air smells faintly of eucalyptus and rubbing alcohol, not from spills or messes, but because it's pumped in on purpose. Ventilation hisses through discreet nozzles above every seat. The floor beneath your feet doesn't creak. It's layered with anti-fatigue rubber panels, often used in hospitals to prevent strain. You take another step and realize, no dust, no crumbs, no half-drunk water bottles. Not even a stray fingerprint. This isn't just clean, it's clinical. This is where Michael Jackson lived between stages, and you probably wouldn't survive a week in it. You step into the narrow corridor, lit from beneath with soft amber lights, casting a sleepy glow against the wall's white leather padding. You could press your cheek against it and never leave a trace. Michael didn't want a cozy cabin with raucous laughter and midnight pizza. He wanted control, and he needed safety. Because to him, the outside world didn't just carry noise, it carried danger, infection, chaos. On this bus, even the doorknobs were antimicrobial. There were custom drawers stocked with vitamins, injectable B12, surgical tape, fresh socks in airtight plastic, and boxes of sterile face masks, not the blue ones we all know now, but white, thick, molded, like a surgeon's second skin. He didn't always wear them to make a statement. Sometimes he just didn't want to breathe what everyone else was breathing, and sometimes he couldn't afford to. The back lounge had two versions, public and private. When guests were invited, rarely, they saw the outer shell. Plush white seats, a mounted TV silently playing old cartoons or musicals. But hidden behind a mirrored panel was the true chamber, padded, dim, and completely sealed. This was where he slept, or meditated, or just escaped. The whole bus had a vacuum-sealed vibe. Door seals weren't just soft, they locked with magnetic closures. Every vent had a filter, every window was double-paned, and if you think this was overkill, remember, this is the same man who once wore a full respirator in an airport years before the world cared about masks. Germs weren't just a concern, they were enemies. Biographers still debate when this obsession really took root. Was it his lupus diagnosis in the 80s? Or the constant skin infections that came with vitiligo treatment? Some say it began even earlier. Those long Jackson 5 tours where a cold or stomach bug meant canceled shows and scoldings. Or maybe it was just that the bigger he got, the more vulnerable he felt. Here's a lesser-known fact. Michael had his tour buses custom-built by the same manufacturers who designed vehicles for diplomatic convoys and mobile military units. Some of the same features you'd find in a presidential motorcade, run-flat tires, bullet-resistant paneling, emergency oxygen valves, were quietly worked into the sleek frame of his ride. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. Even the materials were strategic. The seat fabric wasn't just white, it was bleach-resistant. The bathroom sink had motion sensors long before they were standard, and every single drawer and cabinet was soft close, silent, like the whole space was trying not to wake someone, or something. Michael often told friends that being on tour was like being underwater. You had to carry your own air, protect your own shell. This bus wasn't just a vehicle, it was an extension of his skin. And here's the kicker. One of his drivers once whispered in an interview that the bus had a hidden ventilation override switch. If Michael felt the energy was off, or that someone sick had touched a surface, he could hit that switch and trigger a full internal air purge. The filters would lock, the vents would reverse, and the system would cycle everything in the cabin through an emergency scrub. A breath reset. Like traveling inside a spaceship, the driver said, except the astronaut was famous and the mission was never ending. That's the thing about fame when you're Michael Jackson big. It's not just flashbulbs and screaming fans. It's needing a mobile hospital with a steering wheel. It's building a world where no one can cough near you without consequences, where the simplest ride to the next show is a chessboard of health, risk, and ritual. And on this bus, the king moved silently, because the real stage wasn't under the lights. It was right here, between them. You sit across from him now, in a room that hums with stillness. No stage makeup, no sequin glove, just Michael, barefoot, hoodie sleeves tugged over his knuckles, staring out the dark-tinted window of his hospital-grade tour bus. There's a gentle clatter as the wheels roll over highway seams, and he doesn't flinch. He's learned to move with the vibrations. But tonight, he's still. There's a warmth in the cabin, a soft glow from hidden LEDs running along the ceiling like candlelight in a chapel. It's peaceful, sterile, controlled, which is exactly how he likes it, because behind the curtain of sparkle and motion was a body that, more often than the world knew, struggled to keep up. You rewind the clock with him now. Little Michael, barely 10, already on planes, tour buses, sound checks, and strict rehearsal schedules. Managers watching his weight, audiences demanding their money's worth. He sang through fevers, danced with bruises, and when he was dizzy, they told him to breathe deeper. His mother, Catherine, once said that even as a child, Michael was unusually sensitive to smells and dust. He'd sneeze if someone vacuumed 2 rooms away. But it was more than sensitivity. It was foreshadowing. That little boy with the golden voice would grow up in a whirlwind of limousines and lawsuits. But his body, his actual body, was never built for it. He was delicate. By the time Thriller exploded, so did the expectations. Bigger venues, longer nights, no rest. And beneath the rhinestones and gravity-defying spins was a man nursing migraines, fragile skin, and a diagnosed autoimmune disease. Lupus, a condition that inflames your tissues, your joints, your nerves, and doesn't ask for permission. The tour bus became a sanctuary not just for sleep, but for symptom control. The lighting? Soft and non-flickering, to prevent headaches. The air? Heavily filtered, to avoid flares triggered by allergens or stress. And the temperature was never random. It stayed between 68 and 70 degrees, always. Not too cold, not too warm, just exactly what his immune system could tolerate. And then, of course, there was vitiligo, a condition that stole pigment from his skin, turning once rich brown into patchy pale, then eventually porcelain. The makeup wasn't vanity, it was coverage. But what the public didn't see was the maintenance, daily treatments, skin creams, injections, reactions. Sometimes entire chunks of shows were choreographed around his flare-ups. On the bus, medical-grade moisturizers lined the cabinets like snacks, some refrigerated, some imported, all vital. Biographers still debate how much of his health struggles were physical versus emotional. Some say he exaggerated, others say he downplayed. What we know for sure? He rarely complained, not out loud. But the bus, oh, the bus told you everything. The blackout blinds, the light-blocking goggles, the tray of IV fluids tucked behind the minibar. These weren't props, they were prescriptions in disguise. Here's a lesser-known detail. There was a special compartment, never seen by press, never opened on camera, where his private nurse stored emergency injections, vitamin cocktails, anti-inflammatory agents, even mild sedatives. Not because he abused them, but because sometimes the pain whispered too loudly, and he had to whisper back with something stronger. You watch as he gently adjusts his glove, not the sparkly one, a medical compression glove. His hands sometimes swelled from lupus, and when they did, even signing autographs became a task of grit. On bad days, he'd wear both gloves, not for fashion, but for circulation. And yet, he still danced. That's what most people forget. For all the fragility, he could still erupt into motion, like lightning in velvet, because the stage was his medicine too. It hurt, but it healed. It drained, but it fed him. That paradox ran through every wire of his life. One night in Munich, mid-tour, he collapsed backstage. Dehydration, they said. But what they didn't say was that the moment he got off the hospital stretcher, he asked where the bus was. Not the plane, not the hotel, the bus. Because in his mind, that was where he could really recover, where he could sleep upright if needed, mask on, IV drip set into the wall mount, where the world shrunk down to a hallway, a mattress, a hum. The debate continues. Why didn't he just stop? Why didn't he cancel more shows? But you already know the answer. Because you're here, sitting with him in a mobile bubble, custom built not just for travel, but for survival. This wasn't luxury. It was armor. And there's something sad and strangely beautiful about it. How a man who made millions feel electric needed to carry his own clean air, his own IV bag, his own soft padded floor beneath his feet. You look over at him. He catches your gaze and smiles, gentle, tired, honest. He says, "The show must go on," like it's a lullaby he tells himself. And maybe, just maybe, it is. You follow him now down the bus's narrow corridor, watching his fingers graze the wall as he walks, not for balance but to test. Is the surface still clean, still cool, still safe? This isn't just habit, it's ritual. Because by this point in Michael Jackson's life, germs aren't just an invisible threat. They're everywhere. They're in handshakes, in door handles, in the very air people breathe too close. And when you're Michael, too close happens often. He pauses by a built-in cabinet near the bus's kitchenette. You wouldn't even notice it at first. It looks like part of the trim. But behind that seamless panel, dozens of surgical masks, all neatly stacked in clear, labeled boxes. N95 before N95s were cool. Medical gloves in multiple sizes, tiny glass bottles of hospital-grade sanitizer. Not the watered-down scented stuff. The kind that stings. He grabs one of the masks, holds it up to the light, and smiles. "I like the ones with the nose bridge wire," he says softly. "Tighter fit." He speaks like someone who's had to learn the language of sterility, of seals and barriers and particle-blocking filters. And he has. The press used to joke that he wore masks to be mysterious. Others said it was just for attention. But anyone who actually stepped onto this bus, into this vacuum-sealed sanctuary, knew different. Michael wasn't being theatrical. He was being protective. And not just of himself. You find another drawer, this one containing neatly folded hand towels, individually wrapped in clear plastic. A label reads, "Do not reuse." Even his towels had one-time use policies. You blink. Is this a dressing room on wheels? A private jet? A clinic? In truth, it's all three. But mostly, it's a fortress against contamination. Biographers often wrestle with whether Michael's germophobia was clinical or circumstantial. Did it stem from trauma? From an autoimmune condition? From fame itself? There's no consensus. But what's clear is that it evolved, sharpened, over time. By the 90s, it wasn't just be careful. It was be clean or don't come near me. One security guard recalled how he was once asked to leave the bus mid-conversation because he sneezed. Michael didn't get angry, just quietly gestured to the door. And later, the entire cabin was sanitized again. Twice. It wasn't personal. It was protocol. Here's something odd. Michael hated strong chemical smells, but insisted his bus be cleaned with medical-grade supplies anyway. So the cleaners had to wear masks, work in shifts, and leave air reset time before Michael stepped back aboard. That's how serious it was. A man who moonwalked in front of 80,000 people couldn't sit on a leather cushion unless it had been steam sanitized first. And yet, he was still tender, still playful. You find a box tucked behind the sanitizer stash. Inside, candy. Sealed lollipops, perfectly round peppermints, the kind he'd give to children who visited, or bodyguards on long night drives. He'd hold one out with that soft grin and say, "But don't forget to wash your hands first." He wasn't cold, he was cautious. On a flight between shows in 1993, Michael allegedly asked the flight crew to completely wipe down his seat, tray, and windows twice before takeoff, and then again before landing. He wore gloves the entire time, not designer ones, latex. Still, even among all the sterile surfaces and hospital paraphernalia, he had his comforts. Soft blankets, pillows he traveled with, a specific lavender oil that helped him relax, dabbed on the edge of his masks. He'd sniff it like a secret lullaby, because beneath the layers of protection was a man who never quite felt at ease in his own skin, or in the world around it. Biographers still argue, was this fear or foresight? Did Michael know something the rest of us were too proud to see, that fame isn't just exhausting, it's unhygienic? Thousands of fans scream inches from your face, hotel rooms used by strangers, hands reaching, breathless interviews, coughing crew members. Maybe his compulsions weren't excessive, maybe they were reasonable, just magnified by the microscope of fame. Here's a lesser-known tidbit. Michael once had a completely touchless restroom installed at the back of one of his buses. No handles, no knobs, motion-activated everything. The faucet, the soap dispenser, the flush, even the trash bin opened on a sensor. He called it the clean room. Most people laughed, but after 2020, doesn't sound so funny anymore. He was ahead of his time, and also a little trapped by it, because no matter how sterile the bus was, the world outside always crept in, through velvet ropes, through hotel sheets, through the air itself. And so, each day, Michael woke up and played defense, gloved, masked, sanitized, alone. But tonight, as the bus glides over dark stretches of highway, you see him settle into his seat, pull the soft blanket over his legs, and unwrap a peppermint. He taps it against his lip once before popping it in. The wrapper? Immediately folded and tucked into a sealed trash compartment. He hums something, low and familiar, a melody that sounds like childhood. You don't recognize the tune, but the feeling hits you like a memory you never had. It's safe here, for him and now for you. Because in this moving hospital with moonwalker boots in the closet, even ghosts have to sanitize before they enter. You wake up to the softest vibration, barely more than a whisper through the tires. But Michael's already awake. You find him by the front lounge window, not looking out, but listening. His head is tilted, not in paranoia, but in practice. Because when you live your life in a moving fortress, you learn to detect every shift in rhythm, mechanical or human. Outside, headlights blur and vanish. Inside, the security team is having their morning briefing. Not in a hotel ballroom, not in some conference room, right here, on this bus, every day. Because Michael's security detail wasn't a background feature, it was a living part of the vehicle, trained, rotated, and sometimes armed. You peek through the privacy screen into the forward lounge. 6 men, matching earpieces, matching posture. One scrolls through satellite weather maps. Another reviews a list of known superfans in the city they're entering next. They don't talk much. Every word that passes between them is low, calm, and carefully chosen. Michael's not paranoid. He's meticulous. There's a difference, and it's kept him alive. You might imagine a pop star riding with a couple of bodyguards and a flashy driver, but not Michael. His team ran drills, real ones, evacuation practices, diversion scenarios. They had code words for bathroom breaks, shadow vehicles tailing decoy buses, alternate routes for every venue, even pre-rigged media leaks to misdirect the press. The tour bus wasn't just moving, it was strategizing. Here's a lesser-known fact. Some of the same consultants who worked with heads of state advised on Michael's security setup. At one point, during the dangerous tour, his bus ran with a backup battery of encrypted communications, a full shortwave radio system, separate from cellular towers, in case of network failure or hijack. Yeah, hijack. That was a real scenario they prepared for, and not just from enemies, but from fans. Because with Michael, love came with teeth. One fan once clung to the side of the bus while it pulled out of a hotel garage, crying and begging to be taken with him. She clung so tightly, Her jacket ripped clean down the seam before the guards could get her off. Biographers still debate the psychological toll of that kind of devotion. Was it isolating? Empowering? Both? Maybe the real threat wasn't just outside. It was in not knowing who, at any moment, might cross the line between worship and danger. Michael once told a friend, "I love my fans, but I also know some of them would climb inside me if they could." That wasn't metaphor. That was experience. The guards weren't just muscle. They were filters. The first immune defense against the fever dream of fandom. And they took their role seriously. Shoes had to be clean, clothes lint-free. Anyone entering the bus, even for a brief second, underwent a quick physical scan, discreet but thorough. One of the guards was trained in crowd behavior analysis. His whole job? Watch the fans during Michael's entrance and exit. Identify the shift in posture, the sudden stillness before someone lunges. He once prevented a stage rush in Sao Paulo just by clocking a group of teenagers clenching their fists 2 beats too long. And the bus had layers. Not just compartments, but zones. The outer lounge was green, for publicists, guests, band members. The hallway was yellow. Restricted access. The bedroom suite? That was red. Nobody went there unless invited or assigned. And nobody stayed unless Michael forgot they were there, which he didn't. Ever. Here's something that might surprise you. Michael sometimes played pranks on his guards, especially the new ones. One night he emerged in a full werewolf costume from Thriller, silent and still, and stood at the end of the hallway for 20 minutes, unmoving. When the guard finally turned and saw him, he screamed so loud the entire bus hit the brakes. Michael laughed until his eyes watered, then insisted the man stay on staff because, quote, "he's got good lungs." But humor didn't mean softness. Michael once dismissed a bodyguard mid-tour for leaning too close while speaking. "If you can feel their breath," he said afterward, "you're not protected, you're exposed." And he meant it. Security wasn't just about keeping people out. It was about keeping the idea of safety in. Because for Michael, the bus was a symbol. The one place he could control the entry points, the airflow, the proximity of strangers, the very angle at which his own shadow appeared under the fluorescence. Biographers have long argued whether this level of caution meant he lived in fear. But the truth? He lived in awareness, hyper-awareness. Fame didn't give him that. Fame demanded it. So you sit now on this rolling bunker, watching him tap his finger against the tinted glass in rhythm with the road. He hums something, maybe Smooth Criminal, maybe just a thought. And you realize that while everyone else sees a pop star, what you're riding with is someone navigating a battle plan, not for domination, but for preservation. Because when the world tries to take everything from you, even your breath, you build a bus that breathes back. You shuffle through the dim corridor, past the plush seat cushions and whisper quiet doors, and there it is, the little exam room hidden behind a curved wall near the back of the bus. Most people wouldn't even recognize it at first glance. It looks like a sleek lounge nook. White bench, silver drawer handles, glass front cabinet with faint blue lighting. But you take a closer look and spot it. A fold-out examination table discreetly tucked into the wall, a crash cart beneath the bench, and in the cabinet vials, sealed, labeled, precise. This isn't paranoia, this is preparedness, with a stethoscope. Because Michael Jackson didn't just tour with security and stylists, he toured with doctors, always. Not as an accessory, as a necessity. His health history wasn't a secret, but the extent of his accommodations was something few understood. And on this bus, that reality moved right along with him, mile after mile, diagnosis after diagnosis. Tonight, his personal physician is a soft-spoken man in glasses and a clean-pressed jacket that somehow never wrinkles. He speaks in hushed tones, always 2 steps behind, but never out of reach. He carries a soft leather case at all times. Inside, medications for pain management, allergic reactions, blood pressure, and sleep. Some legal, some whispered about in tabloids, all guarded with the seriousness of an ER. Biographers still argue about how many doctors worked with Michael throughout his career. Some estimate over 50. Others say it was a tighter, rotating circle. But one thing is certain, his medical team wasn't window dressing. They lived the tour, ate the same catered meals, slept in bunks one wall over. They were required to be ready at all times, because when you're Michael Jackson, there is no off day, no calling in sick, no skipping the show in Milan because your head won't stop pounding or your joints are locked up from lupus. You don't cancel the stadium. You bring the clinic with you. And sometimes, even that wasn't enough. One night, midway through the history tour, Michael collapsed after stepping off stage, not from exhaustion, but from severe dehydration and a spike in body temperature. The moment he reached the bus, the team moved like clockwork. IV lines in, oxygen mask on, blackout blinds drawn. The bus didn't move for an hour, not because the route wasn't ready, but because the man inside wasn't. Here's a lesser-known fact. At one point during the bad tour, Michael had a custom recliner installed in the lounge, not for comfort, but because it reclined in a way that relieved pressure on his spine. He sometimes suffered from intense back pain, rumored to be from decades of explosive choreography, awkward stage landings, and that fateful head injury during the Pepsi commercial shoot. And then there were the injections. Not just pain relief, but immune boosters, vitamins, anti-inflammatories. They were delivered on schedule, sometimes during transit. The bus would glide down the highway as a physician quietly slipped a needle into his arm, bandaged it with smooth efficiency, and said nothing. Because this wasn't drama, this was daily life. Fans saw the sparkles, the spins, the surgical precision of his movement. What they didn't see was the surgical support happening behind the curtain. A nurse waiting off stage with cooling gel, a doctor monitoring vitals backstage, a medical file as thick as a novel stashed in a hidden compartment of the bus. There's a cultural debate here, and it lingers. Did the medical staff enable his overwork or protect him from it? Were they healers or handlers? Biographers are split. Some defend the necessity of the team, others raise eyebrows at how lines blurred between care and control. But what's clear is this: Michael knew his limits. He just didn't like them. He believed in pushing through pain, not ignoring it, but outdancing it. And the doctors? They made that possible. Even when they wished he'd rest. Even when they were the ones pleading, just one night off, Michael. But the show always went on. And so did the medicine. And yet, somehow, even in all that medical intensity, there were moments of tenderness. He once offered a lollipop to a nurse after a long show. "You earned it more than I did," he joked, his voice hoarse but warm. And when one of his younger doctors caught a stomach bug mid-tour, Michael insisted the bus stop so the man could rest in his own quarters. "Nobody heals the healer," he said. Here's another odd but true detail. There was a standing order on file with several pharmacies near major tour stops. It was codenamed Smooth Routine. The package included sterile wipes, antihistamines, electrolyte packets, and skin patches, ready within 30 minutes of a call. Every pharmacist involved signed an NDA, and while the media often speculated wildly about the contents of those medical kits, the truth was less scandalous, more sobering. He was managing chronic illness, immune flare-ups, pain, exhaustion, all while being expected to electrify tens of thousands night after night. So here you are, on the very bus where doctors stitched silence into the seams, where medical care was as routine as makeup, where every drawer might contain a breath monitor, a blood glucose strip, a sterile needle. And still, Michael jokes softly with the nurse, cracks a smile, drums his fingers on his lap in rhythm with a song only he can hear. Because for him, even when pain visited like an uninvited guest, the music was louder. You're sitting now in the dining nook of the bus, a sleek, padded booth with rounded corners and a table that looks like it was pulled straight from a first-class airport lounge. Everything is curved, smooth, easy to wipe down. Even the salt shaker is enclosed in clear acrylic, like a museum artifact. Michael's already seated. Legs tucked neatly under him, socks on, no shoes, never shoes inside the cabin. He leans forward, elbows on the table, sipping warm herbal tea through a stainless steel straw. Across from him, a meal has just arrived, and not from a drive-through. A tray clicks into place in front of him with a quiet precision. Silver cover, folded napkin, sanitized utensils still wrapped in plastic. A member of his staff sets it down with gloved hands, gives a slight nod, and disappears. No words, just protocol. The lid lifts slowly. You expect extravagance, caviar, gold flakes, something sculpted. But no, tonight it's steamed vegetables, grilled white fish, and half a sweet potato. Everything portioned out, everything clean, everything bland. The kind of food someone might serve in a recovery ward. Except, it's on a tour bus. You reach for your own snack, a protein bar from your pocket, and Michael gently gestures toward the sink. "Wash your hands first," he says, not unkindly, just as a rule. See, food on this bus isn't just sustenance. It's part of the system, carefully curated, nutritionally monitored, often prepared off-site by trusted chefs and delivered in tamper-proof packaging. Sometimes double-sealed, always temperature-checked. Here's a fun fact you didn't see in the documentaries. Michael had a rolling inventory of approved foods. Literally, an actual list that lived in a small binder, updated every week. It tracked ingredients, possible allergens, and how each meal made him feel afterward. Too heavy for stage, good for energy, made my throat dry. A lot of people thought he was picky. In reality, he was managing something more complicated. A body that could betray him at any time. He wasn't eating for taste, he was eating for control. Biographers still wonder where the line was drawn between health and obsession. Some say he developed eating habits that bordered on disordered. Others say he was simply navigating a world where one poorly timed meal could sabotage a sold-out show. Either way, food became a quiet battleground, the one thing that entered his body by choice. And then, there was the candy. You wouldn't expect it, not after all that discipline. But oh, he loved candy. Lollipops, sour belts, soft caramels, and crinkly wrappers. On more than one occasion, he'd request something sweet after a perfectly calculated dinner. "Just one," he'd say, before lining up 3 on the table like little jewels. He didn't eat them recklessly. No, even candy had its ceremony. Unwrap slowly, examine, pop it in and let it dissolve, never bite. He said the sugar helped his voice feel loose. Whether it was true or just comfort, nobody questioned it. There's a story one road manager tells. During a stop in Switzerland, Michael refused a beautifully plated dessert at a high-end hotel. Too fussy, too open. But when a little girl visiting backstage offered him a heart-shaped lollipop she'd brought from home, he accepted it with both hands. Wiped the wrapper down first, of course, but he ate it, smiled, called it the best part of his day. Because control didn't mean coldness. Even the bus kitchen, if you could call it that, was designed around him. The microwave had been removed. Too many radiation myths. Instead, everything was gently reheated on an induction surface. The water filtration system was custom installed, with a reverse osmosis filter that technicians from Japan came to check every 6 months. And forget tap water. He wouldn't touch it, not even to rinse an apple. Here's a lesser-known detail. Michael often traveled with a portable food lab kit. Not for every meal, but for anything new. It contained pH strips, allergen test swabs, and something called an ATP meter, used to detect contamination levels on food surfaces. Most people would call this extreme. He called it smart. And still, despite the science, he remained soft about food memories. He'd talk fondly about his mother's cornbread, or how he used to sneak donuts with his brothers between rehearsals. There was a wistfulness to it, as though the world before the rules was warmer, tastier, free. But now, every bite was a decision, a trade, a step in a choreography of survival. Biographers sometimes get stuck here, trying to frame it as sad. But you sit across from him and don't see sadness. You see someone doing what he must to keep the engine running. You see him lean back, satisfied after a modest meal. You see him close his eyes for a moment, tracing a melody in his head. Maybe the song for tomorrow's rehearsal. Maybe something no one will ever hear. You look at the spotless table, the plate, already whisked away by a gloved hand, the silence, deep and gentle. And you realize that for all the hospital-like precision, Michael wasn't trying to be perfect. He was just trying not to get sick. Because when the show depends on your every breath, every bite becomes sacred. It's after midnight now, and the highway is empty. The bus glides along, smooth as a lullaby, and you can barely hear the tires roll beneath you. That's not just good design, it's intentional. You're in a chamber wrapped in silence, a mobile soundproof bunker designed for a man who lived in noise but craved quiet. You step softly toward the rear lounge, where Michael's bunk is tucked into the far end like a private sleeping capsule. The door slides shut behind you with a click so soft, it's almost imagined. And suddenly, the world disappears. No traffic hum, no generator rattle, no crew chatter in the cabin, just air. Even that, whisper quiet. The walls of this room are no ordinary material. Beneath the leather paneling lies a multi-layered structure. Dense acoustic foam, vibration-dampening mats, and a specialty polymer used in military training facilities. This isn't overkill. This is sanctuary. He once described his bunk as a place where even thoughts have to whisper. You glance around the space. It's barely bigger than a walk-in closet. But every inch is precise. A memory foam mattress cut to size, silk bedding in muted colors, light-blocking curtains you could mistake for a hotel wall, tiny LED reading lights dimmed to candle glow, no blinking electronics, no sudden flickers. Even the digital clock fades in and out so gently, it feels like it's breathing with you. Here's a quirky detail. Michael had all the window shades modified with triple insulation. Not just for light, though that was part of it, but for sound. He hated the high-pitched whistle some shades made when the wind hit just right. "It cuts through dreams," he once told a designer. That one comment led to 2 months of acoustic testing. They fixed it. Biographers often debate why sound mattered so much to him. Was it just sensitivity? A musician's ear gone hypersensitive with age? Or was it deeper, about peace? About reclaiming control over a world that had always been too loud, too sudden? After all, this was someone who had spent decades performing for screaming fans. Screams so loud they caused nosebleeds in security guards. Crowds that shook hotel windows. Reporters shouting questions 2 feet from his face. And inside, a nervous system constantly absorbing every vibration. So here, on this bus, he built the opposite of all that. Silence. Even the air conditioning ducts were re-engineered. You think that's a joke? It's not. A special technician from Sweden was flown in during the dangerous tour to quiet the faint buzz in the ceiling fan above his bunk. Michael called it the mosquito. And once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. So they replaced the whole system with a sound-canceling airflow module. Whisper air. Because anything louder could disrupt rest. Or worse, inspiration. That's right, he wrote here too. Lyrics, melodies, full compositions. In this quiet, insulated cocoon, he'd sometimes sit up in bed, scribble a line on hotel stationery, then tuck it into a drawer beside the mattress. Sometimes the drawer held cough drops, sometimes crystals, sometimes a single white glove. Here's something almost nobody knows. During the history tour, Michael had a custom soundboard installed under the mattress, not to record, but to feel. Low-frequency vibrations synced with ambient tracks he played while drifting off. Rain, wind, old orchestral movie scores. He said it helped his body remember rhythm even in sleep. He didn't just hear music, he lived in it, so much so that even his silence had structure. There's a cultural debate around whether his quest for quiet was about control or about trauma. Some say it was the result of childhood overexposure, a boy pushed too hard, too early, too long. Others think it was about creativity, making space for genius to emerge, undisturbed. And maybe it was both. Maybe he needed silence the way other people need sunlight, not because the noise hurt, but because the silence healed. You lie back now, in the bunk next to his. Yes, there are 2 mirror images in case someone needed to stay close. Maybe a doctor, maybe a sibling, maybe just someone trusted. The mattress is firm but forgiving. The darkness isn't heavy, it's kind. The walls don't echo even when you move. It's like sleeping inside a dream that remembers not to wake you. Michael once said, "Sound is sacred, silence is too." And here, in this chamber built for stillness, that truth feels so real you could bottle it. Because when the crowd fades, when the cameras turn off, and the moonwalkers rest, There has to be one place left where not even a whisper follows. And tonight, you found it. You wake up, not to noise, but to the gentle shift of light. Barely there, like dawn filtered through silk. But when you open your eyes, there's no sunrise peeking through the window. Because there is no window. Not in the traditional sense anyway. What looks like a window, framed, smooth, curtained, is in fact a high-resolution screen. It plays a looped projection of forest canopies moving in the wind, or a desert highway glowing under golden hour light. Sometimes, if Michael felt nostalgic, it played black and white footage of old Hollywood film sets. Always serene, never jarring. The sound? Barely audible birdsong, or waves, or nothing at all. He called them calm views, and they were never random. On this bus, glass is rare, vulnerable, unsafe. Real windows are few, and when they exist, they're double-sealed and mirrored black from the outside. You couldn't see in, even if you pressed your face to the glass. But from inside, that was curated, controlled, constructed for emotion, not geography. Biographers still debate when this began, this retreat from real-world windows. Some say it was the trauma of always being watched. Others say it was practical. The sun irritated his skin. But most agree it became something bigger, symbolic. If the outside world wouldn't offer peace, he'd manufacture it. You walk down the corridor now and spot another screen, disguised as a window near the dining area. It plays footage of snow falling over a cabin porch. But Michael hasn't toured anywhere snowy in weeks. Doesn't matter. He liked how it made the room feel quiet in the bones. And here's a quirky, lesser-known touch. The digital windows were mood-sensitive, literally. A technician on staff could shift the scenes depending on how Michael was feeling. They had playlists of visuals, cool and floating, safe and small, magic forest. They once played a thunderstorm scene for 2 hours because he liked the rhythm it made on the non-existent roof. It sounds excessive until you remember that outside these walls, the world was always watching. He couldn't stroll through a park, couldn't sit by a lake, couldn't lean against a window in peace. So he brought those worlds inside, recreated them, looped them, lived inside them. There's one display he loved most, a view of a treehouse. The camera angled upward, as though you were sitting on the floor inside, looking out across a field at dusk. He had that one specially recorded on the Neverland Ranch grounds. It reminded him, he once said, of how the sky felt when you were still allowed to climb things. Let that line sit with you for a moment. The bus may have moved across time zones, through cities, over borders, but emotionally, it parked where he needed it to. The windows, if you could call them that, helped. They didn't show where he was. They showed what he needed to feel. And still, despite all this magic, Michael kept real blackout shades behind the faux windows. Just in case he wanted pitch dark, in case the screens flickered or lagged, in case he wanted to pretend there were no windows at all. Here's another small but telling detail. Every faux window had a privacy lockout setting. With one button, Michael could freeze the display, hold the sky in place. He did it often. A forest mid-sway, a cloud paused mid-drift, as if to say, this moment is enough. Biographers sometimes call this behavior escapist, detached, maybe even a little sad. But others argue it was genius. Who else had the clarity to shape his environment so thoroughly? Who else, under so much pressure, thought to build beauty into blank spaces? Even the hallway had small screens tucked into alcoves, showing falling petals or drifting jellyfish. He'd pass them without glancing, but once, you saw him stop. Just stop and watch a red leaf fall over and over. Not sad, just still. Maybe that's what the windows were really for. Not to show the world, but to quiet it. Not to remind him of what he was missing, but to anchor him in something soft, repeatable, and always under his command. And you, riding in this temple of quiet images and soundless skies, begin to feel it too. The way the fake window light reflects off the matte white interior, the way the shadows move like breath. It doesn't matter if the world outside is rain or desert or flashing lights. In here, it's always exactly what he needed. Because when you live your whole life under glass, sometimes the most powerful window is the one you build yourself. It's the kind of thing you wouldn't think about until you try living on the road for months. Sleep. Not just falling asleep, but the wear of it. Hotel beds change nightly. Some too soft, some too firm, some with springs that creak like they're laughing at you. But Michael Jackson didn't gamble with rest. That's why this tour bus wasn't just outfitted with a bed, it followed him. You heard that right. The mattress you're looking at right now, with its pale gray linen cover and memory foam core, flew ahead of him before each stop. Hotel room? Strip the bed and swap in his. Always the same one. Always the same sheets. Always sealed in climate-controlled packaging until unboxed. He called it the Cloud. And not for nothing. It was custom-made from hypoallergenic materials, molded to fit his spine, and lined with temperature-stabilizing gel foam that kept his body cool but not cold. There was no tag on it, no brand, no corners cut. Biographers still don't know the manufacturer's name. Whoever made it had to sign a lifetime NDA. You sit on the edge now. It doesn't sink too far, just enough to cradle. It smells faintly of lavender and cedarwood, not from perfume, but from diffuser pods discreetly built into the headboard. The whole bed was a system. Sleep wasn't a luxury. It was his reset switch. He once said, "If I can't sleep, I can't sing." And he meant it. Here's a lesser-known fact. Michael traveled with a specialized neck pillow shaped like an elongated figure eight. It looked odd, but it aligned his cervical spine perfectly. He used it not just in bed, but sometimes during long makeup sessions or when he had to rest in odd positions before a show. Biographers often debate his relationship with sleep. He reportedly struggled with insomnia for years, some say since childhood. Others blame the touring schedules, the chronic pain, the constant pressure. And of course, there were the medications, the elephant in the room. But here on this bus, you begin to see a fuller picture. He didn't abuse sleep. He chased it, respected it, made room for it in every schedule. And when he couldn't find it naturally, he tried everything. White noise machines, guided meditations, soft music loops of classical scores slowed down to lullaby tempo. Even weighted blankets, long before they became trendy. The bed itself had its own GPS tag. No joke, his team tracked it constantly, like precious cargo. Lost luggage? Fine. Missing stage gear? Manageable. Misplaced the bed? That was a crisis, because the mattress wasn't just physical comfort, it was emotional stability. He trusted it. There's a story a stage manager once told. During a leg of the Bad tour in Australia, a hotel staffer mistakenly swapped out Michael's bed with the default suite mattress. No one realized until he lay down and immediately sat back up, whispering, "This isn't it." Not in anger, in disbelief. He spent the night back on the bus, in the narrower travel version of the mattress, which had been built to match the hotel version as closely as possible. That's right, he had two. An in-transit version and a stationary one. Nearly identical. Same firmness, same linen count, same scent packets, different frame. Because consistency wasn't just preference, it was protection. Even the position of the bed mattered, always aligned east to west, never north to south. The energy's wrong, he'd say. Whether it was spiritual, physical, or just habit, it mattered to him, and so it mattered to everyone around him. There's a quiet beauty in that, in a life where so little stayed still. Tour dates, city names, crew members, this one thing did. The bed, the sheets, the hour he tried to sleep, no matter what coast he was on. He clung to it not out of luxury, but out of necessity. You look up and notice a small panel above the headboard, a touchscreen, 4 buttons, dim, cooler, nature loop, and lock. That last one, it engaged the room's privacy mode, sealed doors, no interruptions, silent alert system for emergencies only. Once pressed, no one entered, not even the doctor, unless invited. And under the mattress, just beneath the frame, was a hidden drawer. Inside, not much. A few family photos, a folded scarf, a note, likely from one of his kids. That was his real pillow, the part that didn't support the neck, but the heart. Biographers sometimes frame this traveling bed as eccentric, excessive. But what you see now, sitting on the edge of it, is something different. This isn't indulgence. This is a man who built a single island in the middle of a storm and refused to let it drift. Because when you give the world your voice, your image, your body, night after night, you deserve at least one place to sleep that never changes. And here, on the cloud, he finally let himself float. The bus is still rolling, smooth as ever. But tonight, the silence feels a little heavier. You pass by the lounge where Michael used to sit cross-legged on the floor. Not because he had to, but because chairs felt too rigid. He said the floor made him feel grounded. Ironic, considering he rarely had the chance to actually touch the ground without 100 cameras waiting. Tonight, there's a quiet tension in the air, and you can feel it in the walls. Because even though this bus was a sanctuary, it was also a kind of cage, one he designed himself. Padded, sterile, safe, but still a cage. And the more time you spend here, the more you begin to understand what it cost to build it. Fame gave him wings and handcuffs. Michael used to joke that he was like Peter Pan trapped in a petri dish, forever young, but hyper-sanitized. And when you live like that long enough, you start to wonder if freedom and safety are enemies. Biographers often split here. Was Michael Jackson a man in control of his kingdom, or a puppet whose strings were held by security, health regimens, tour dates, contracts, and expectations? The truth is, he was both. He could disappear from a hotel without anyone knowing how. He could delay an entire show because the energy backstage felt off. He could fire a bodyguard for wearing the wrong cologne. But he couldn't go get a coffee without 3 decoys in a private vehicle. Couldn't sneeze in public without it becoming a rumor. Couldn't sleep in a stranger's guest room or eat from a diner menu without a dozen filters in between. Even this bus, beautiful, silent, precise, moved only when he said go. But it had to go. Because behind every controlled environment was a concert, a press obligation, a deadline. There's a moment you won't forget. One night, he stood near the front of the bus, forehead resting against the cool glass of a sealed window. No view, no people, just black highway and 1,000 miles of dark. And he whispered, "I miss not being known." Let that settle in your chest. Here's a lesser-known detail. At one point, Michael considered building a second tour bus, identical to the first, but empty. A decoy, not just for fans or paparazzi, but for himself. He wanted to be able to look out a hotel window and see it driving off without him in it, just to remember what stillness felt like. It never got made, too expensive even for him, but the idea lingered. This bus was a paradox. It protected him from the world, but it also separated him from it. You'd think the plush leather seats, the touchless water dispensers, the custom mattress, the blackout screens, all of it would feel luxurious. But over time, it starts to feel like a very elegant isolation chamber. Even the music here, soft loops of ambient tones, was designed to fill the quiet without pulling him out of his own thoughts. He once told a staffer, "I need sound, but not conversation." That sums it up, doesn't it? And yet, he loved people, loved them with a childlike purity. He wrote songs about healing the world, about seeing the best in others. He welcomed fans into his heart, even if he couldn't welcome them into his actual space. Because his space was fragile, it had rules. There's a story from the history tour. During a fuel stop in the middle of nowhere, Michael stepped off the bus to stretch his legs. Rare. A young boy approached him, quietly. No pen, no photo request. Just asked, "Are you tired?" And Michael bent down, touched the boy's shoulder, and said, "Not tired, just a little quiet today." He handed the kid a lollipop from his pocket, then got back on board. He wasn't trying to be unreachable. He was just trying to stay intact. Biographers still argue whether he built walls too high, whether the rules became the problem. But being Michael Jackson wasn't a job. It was a 24-hour state of being. The face, the posture, the energy, the danger, the myth. And when the whole world sees you as something magical, it's hard to be mundane. hard to get toothpaste without a bodyguard, hard to open a window, hard to breathe freely unless you've purified the air first. Even his sense of spontaneity had to be choreographed. Impulse, once rehearsed, no longer feels like impulse. You sit now at the back of the bus, looking down the hallway lined with soft lights. It's beautiful, and heavy, and kind of sad, like a museum built by someone who never got to leave. But then you remember, he chose this, at least part of it. He chose to be safe, to be clean, to keep singing, keep dancing, keep giving pieces of himself to people who would never meet him. Because the only thing more dangerous than being trapped was not being able to perform at all. And so he rode, night after night, in a tour bus that cradled both the boy who loved the stage and the man who longed for peace. You wouldn't expect it from someone so meticulous, so anchored in cleanliness, protocols, and science. But Michael Jackson, for all his discipline, still made room for magic. Not the kind with doves and top hats, the quiet kind. Intuition, ritual, superstition, and nowhere did it show up more consistently than in the driver's seat. This bus, this moving sanctuary, wasn't just driven by any qualified professional. Michael didn't care about years of trucking experience or whether you could parallel park a 40-foot coach in the rain. What mattered to him was vibe. Drivers were vetted not just for skill, but for energy, birth signs, calmness, whether they flinched under pressure, whether they felt right. The final decision? Always his. "I can tell when someone drives with fear," he once said, "and I can't live in fear." You meet one of those drivers tonight. Tall, quiet, mid-50s now. He still calls him Mr. Jackson, even in memory. He tells you how Michael would sometimes ask what time the man was born, not just the date. "I just want to feel your moon," he'd say, then nod like that settled it. Some biographers chalk this up to eccentricity. Others say it was the residue of growing up Jehovah's Witness and then later exploring spirituality from all corners, numerology, Eastern philosophy, even psychic energy readings. But whatever the root, superstition was part of the architecture of this bus. And it wasn't just the drivers. The start of every tour included a small ceremony, usually just Michael and one or two trusted crew. A quick prayer, a cleansing, a quiet wish whispered at the front step. "Let the road be soft," he'd murmur. Sometimes he'd drop a rose petal in the driver's seat. Sometimes a single feather, just a symbol, just in case. He believed in signs. If the first leg of a journey was bumpy, he'd cancel the next day's route. If a bird flew alongside the bus for too long, he took it as a message, either from God or from his mother. Either way, he noticed everything, and everything meant something. Here's a lesser-known detail. One of Michael's buses had a small crystal embedded in the dash, hidden behind a panel mounted with velvet. Only the driver knew. It wasn't to be touched, just kept close. Energy stone, heart stone. "It keeps the ride smooth," Michael once said. And while it sounds mystical, even whimsical, you begin to realize this wasn't fantasy. This was how he created meaning in a world that stripped it away. Fame turns randomness into routine. Schedules dominate. Every minute becomes owned by someone else. So Michael built space for mystery, for little rituals that made him feel like he was still driving the ship, even if someone else held the wheel. He had his good days to depart, never Tuesdays. He preferred Thursdays for international crossings, Fridays for starting a new leg of a tour. New moons, new routes, he liked to say, though he was only half joking. The bus itself was like a living horoscope. There were numbers he didn't like, room numbers, route numbers, even license plate sequences. If the number 7 appeared 3 times in a row, that was a go signal. If a route number added up to 13, detour, always. Even the seatbelt he used, yes, he wore it religiously, had a tiny patch sewn into the strap. Not visible, just a scrap of fabric with a single stitched word, return. He never explained it. Maybe it meant return home, return safe, return to self. Biographers still debate how seriously he took all this. Some say it was a way to soften the grind, to inject wonder into a life that otherwise followed the harsh rhythm of commercialism. Others think it was survival, a way to protect himself from an industry that devoured people like him whole. And maybe they're both right. Because when you've spent your whole life being moved, pushed, pulled, spun, scheduled, it makes sense to cling to whatever steering wheel you can find, even if it's spiritual, even if it's stitched into a seatbelt. You watch now as the current driver, young, calm, chosen by team members who understood, takes the next curve with a grace that borders on ballet. No sudden turns, no jolts. The bus barely leans. Michael would have liked that. Driving is like dancing, he once said. You don't drag the partner, you lead. And yes, he'd ride up front sometimes, in silence, just watching the road, or tapping rhythms into the armrest. Not because he was checking the route, he trusted the team, but because he loved the symmetry of highway lights and midnight lanes. It calmed him. On rare nights, he'd lean forward, whisper something to the driver, maybe a thank you, maybe a request to stop and watch the stars. And if the stars felt wrong, he'd turn the bus around, because the show could wait, the vibe never could. And here you are now, gliding through the dark, stars spinning above you, wheels humming like a lullaby, and you understand that this wasn't just about superstition. It was about reclaiming a feeling of choice. Even if the world always wanted more, he still got to say who held the wheel. You step into the rear lounge of the bus again, only this time the lights are lower, the hum of the road quieter, the temperature slightly cooler. You'd almost think nothing had changed, until you notice the polished chrome latch on the floor, flush with the surface, easy to miss. It opens a hatch. Beneath it, padded in velvet and sealed in surgical glass, sits a unit unlike anything else on the bus. Sleek, cold, quiet. This is the chamber. Michael's mobile hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Not a myth, not a tabloid fantasy. A real, medically certified piece of equipment that lived on the bus whenever it could. When logistics failed, it met him at the hotel. When security got tight, it was disguised in shipping containers. But whenever possible, it traveled with him, quietly, discreetly, like a secret guardian of sleep. You wouldn't know what it was at first glance. It's not some bulky sci-fi tube. It's elegant, compact, lined with internal lighting that mimics natural dawn and dusk cycles. Inside, smooth cotton lining, headrest, air vents positioned with surgical accuracy. No frills, no buttons to play with. This wasn't for show. It was for recovery. Michael first became interested in hyperbaric therapy in the late 80s. Whether it started as curiosity or necessity is up for debate. Some say it began after the burns from the infamous Pepsi commercial accident. Others say he'd already been experimenting with oxygen therapy long before. What's certain is that it became part of his wellness routine. Biographers still debate how much time he actually spent in it. Some claim he used it nightly during tours. Others say only during flare-ups or after especially intense performances. But those who were there, who rode the bus with him, confirm the chamber wasn't a gimmick. It was part of the protocol. And here's a lesser-known detail. He called it the bubble, sometimes jokingly, sometimes tenderly. "I'm gonna get in the bubble," he'd tell his nurse with a boyish grin, like he was crawling into a spaceship before liftoff. And maybe, in a way, he was. Hyperbaric therapy works by delivering oxygen at higher than normal atmospheric pressure. It's used to speed up healing, fight fatigue, and reduce inflammation. Michael believed in its ability to help his skin, his immune system, and perhaps most importantly, his voice. After long sets of singing and dancing, the chamber soothed his lungs, gave his body the breath back. You sit beside it now, listening to the soft whir of its filtration system, the gentle pulse of air, like a heartbeat. It's not claustrophobic, it's womb-like, safe. He once said it reminded him of floating, of being in water without weight. Maybe that's why it helped him sleep when nothing else did. Here's another odd but telling fact. The chamber had a built-in audio player. Nothing fancy, just a port to loop quiet music or spoken affirmations. Michael often played classical piano, soft lullabies, or even his own demos slowed down to a whisper. He'd fall asleep to himself, humming. And yes, he traveled with custom oxygen tanks, medical grade, climate controlled, not just for emergencies, but for anxiety. For moments when the air backstage felt too thick, for when the hotel smelled wrong, for when his breathing didn't feel like his. A quick 15 minutes with the mask on, and he'd say, "That's better." Biographers speculate endlessly. Was this medical necessity or obsession? Was he ahead of his time or trapped by his fears? But you're here now. You feel the peace in the room, the precision, the care. This wasn't about fear. It was about recovery. You don't perform like that, don't give that much, without needing a way to refuel. And still, he never let it become a prison. He joked about the chamber, dressed it up with a little sticker once, just a tiny moonwalk silhouette near the latch. "So he knows who's inside," he quipped. Once, when asked why he needed it, he paused and simply said, "Because I've given my body to the world. This is how I get it back." That line lives in you now, because you see it, clear as day, the quiet war between performance and preservation, between spectacle and silence, between being a god on stage and a man on the bus. The chamber was just one tool in a whole symphony of survival. You look around this room now and see not extravagance, but intention. Every panel, every filtered vent, every seam in the flooring, it's all part of the same plan. A plan not just to keep moving, but to keep standing. And tonight, as the oxygen chamber hisses faintly and the road hums below, you understand something simple and profound. Even the king of pop needed somewhere to just breathe. The road tonight cuts through empty desert, dark and vast and starless. The bus hums along, lights dimmed low, silence reigning except for the gentle creak of floorboards as you walk toward the back cabin. You find Michael, alone, perched on the edge of the bench seat, shirt collar open, sleeves pushed up. He's massaging the back of his head, slow, circular movements. It's a familiar ritual. The pain is here again. You don't have to ask why. The story lives in infamy. 1984, the filming of a Pepsi commercial, the pyrotechnics misfiring, a sudden blast of light and flame. Michael was mid-performance, spinning, glowing, unaware. Then, fire. His scalp ignited, security froze. He didn't scream, just dropped and clutched the sides of his head as his hair burned. Third-degree burns, scalp trauma, and something that never quite healed. Not physically, not emotionally. Biographers still argue over what that moment really did to him. Some say it was just the beginning of the painkiller prescriptions. Others call it the genesis of his medical routine, the catalyst for everything that would follow. What they all agree on is that it changed him, deeply. You see the echoes of it even now, decades later, etched into the choices he made on the bus. The ceiling above his bed, lined with fire-retardant foam, not standard, custom. The hallway, installed with extra ceiling clearance, not because he was tall, but because the feeling of overhead closeness triggered discomfort. And here's a detail you won't find in the tabloids. He never allowed open flames near his vehicle. No candles, no lighters, not even birthday cakes. If the crew celebrated his birthday on tour, it was with a flameless LED candle and a whispered song. The wounds ran that deep. You open a cabinet above his sleeping area and find it stocked with scar cream, anti-inflammatory gel, cold compresses. Next to it, a silk head covering. He wore it to sleep when the pain came back. Said it helped with the fire dreams. Even now, decades removed from that one accident, the trauma didn't just flare up in pain. It flickered into his imagination. He'd dream of stages catching fire, of crowds lit by sudden orange light. Not nightmares exactly, more like memories trying to finish themselves. And the irony? He loved pyrotechnics, loved them on stage, loved the spectacle, the timing, the way the fire could bloom in perfect sync with a beat drop. "It's drama," he said once. "It lifts the show." But he never stood too close, never quite trusted it. The magic had already turned on him once. Biographers have combed through medical files where they could, and note the layers of treatment that followed that moment. Skin grafts, nerve therapy, scalp injections. None of it ever completely fixed what was broken. And so, like everything else in his life, Michael found a way to build around it. That's where the bus came in, the ultimate workaround. You find something unexpected in a drawer below his bunk. A tiny vial of lavender oil and peppermint extract. Not for luxury, for relief. He'd rub a bit along his temples when the headaches began, close his eyes, and disappear under his scarf, pretending he was in another body, one that hadn't been burned. There's a cultural conversation around this. Did the Pepsi fire mark the start of his dependency on medicine? Was that the moment his relationship with doctors, with pain, with perfection, shifted? The arguments go on, but you don't need a debate. You see it in the way he moves tonight. Careful, rhythmic, deliberate. You see it in the way he turns the lights down when the tension starts, in the way he closes his eyes and says, "It's just buzzing. It'll stop soon." He once described the feeling like a drum under his skin, not pounding, twitching, as though the nerves were still confused, still sending signals from a place that wasn't there anymore. Here's another lesser-known truth. Michael had wigs specially fitted with pressure relief seams, not for appearance, but to avoid pressing on the most damaged areas of his scalp. His team worked with stylists, medical consultants, even hat designers, to get it right. Because beauty shouldn't hurt. And for him, it already did. So he built environments, like this bus, where it didn't have to. And yet, he never leaned into bitterness. He never turned the accident into a badge. He never used it to demand sympathy. He simply adjusted, quietly, precisely, like someone rearranging their steps to avoid a cracked tile. There's a story from a stop on the Dangerous tour. Michael skipped sound check because of a flare-up. Fans outside waited for hours. Instead of sending a press release, he sent the driver to deliver autographed notes to each fan in the front row. "Tell them I didn't forget them. My head just needed some quiet." The driver cried telling that story, because this wasn't a man who let pain define him. He just didn't pretend it wasn't there. And now, as you watch him lie back, eyes closed, breath slowing, peppermint oil cooling his temples, you realize something powerful. He didn't build this bus to run away from the fire. He built it so he could keep going through it. The engine rumbles tonight, not gently, but like it's tired, like even the machine has had enough. You're not imagining it. This was the leg of the history tour where things started to break. Not just in the bus, but in Michael too. It's 1997. The shows are bigger, louder, longer. The costumes heavier, the crowds more frenzied. Every stadium is a fortress. Every step outside the vehicle requires a precision choreography of security and shields. And the bus? It's being pushed to its absolute limit. You step into the cabin now and see the signs of wear. A cabinet latch that clicks twice instead of once. A scuff on the corner of the calm view screen. The air vents hiss a little more than they used to. One of the blackout panels won't quite seal. Nothing catastrophic, just fraying at the edges. A metaphor wrapped in upholstery. Michael notices it all. He always does. He runs his fingers over a scratch on the privacy door like it's a scar. Not upset, just resigned. Because this bus, like his body, wasn't built for this kind of endurance. It was built for magic, for recovery, for silence. But on this tour, there is no silence. Outside the bus, fans wait in mobs that look more like zombie movies than meet and greets. At one hotel in Munich, they clawed at the windows, not even realizing they weren't looking into the real bus. It was a decoy. The real one was hidden in a tunnel 2 blocks away. But the decoy still shook from their pounding. Michael watched from a monitor and whispered, "They love me too loud." Biographers describe this leg of the tour as one of the most punishing. Cities blended together. Flight delays turned into spontaneous hotel stays. Rehearsals doubled up when venues fell behind on setup. Michael, ever the perfectionist, refused to cut corners. And so the corners began cutting him. Here's a lesser-known fact. During the Eastern Europe stretch, the suspension system on the bus had to be replaced twice in a month, not because of the roads, but because of the weight. Not just cargo, energy. The bus wasn't just carrying Michael. It was carrying the intensity, the scrutiny, the grief, the prayers, the desperation of millions. You could feel it pressing in from all sides. Inside, his medical drawer was restocked almost daily. Extra IV fluids, electrolytes, injections for inflammation, back support pads, a compression wrap for his knees, lavender oil, peppermints. The things that used to last a week were now disappearing in hours. And yet, he performed. Every night, he moonwalked like it didn't hurt, hit high notes like his throat hadn't been coated in numbing spray 20 minutes before curtain, smiled like he hadn't collapsed in the dressing room the night before. You ride along now as the bus turns a corner in Paris. Fans are running beside it, shouting his name, cameras bouncing in shaky hands. Michael doesn't look out. He's in the soundproof lounge, playing a rough cut of a new song, something unreleased, something no one may ever hear. He hums, then stops, winces, adjusts the scarf around his neck, not for fashion, for the headache, for the swelling. He whispers to himself, 5 more cities. And maybe it's just exhaustion, but you notice something else tonight. Michael's relationship to the bus has changed. It used to be a shelter, a nest. Now it feels like armor he's outgrowing. Even his bunk seems smaller, the filtered air thinner. Biographers argue about this period. Some say he should have stopped. Others say stopping would have broken him more. But the fact is, he kept going. And the bus, just like him, kept rolling, even as the frame started to groan under the weight. There's a moment you won't forget. One morning in Helsinki, Michael came aboard after a brutal night and sat at the little dining booth, alone. No music, no crew, just a cup of warm water and the quiet rattle of the refrigerator. He pulled out a napkin and scribbled on it with a felt pen. If this bus could talk, it would sing the blues. Then folded it, tucked it into the sugar jar, never spoke of it again. And here's something that only insiders knew. The staff started referring to this vehicle, not by its serial number, but by nickname, the Vessel. Because by then, it wasn't just a bus. It was a body within a body, a second skin, one holding the fragments of the first together, long enough to finish the mission. Eventually, the tour did end, and the bus went in for repairs. Deep, expensive, time-consuming repairs. But Michael? He didn't go in for rest. He started planning the next thing. Another album, another show, another ride. Because when your life is a current that never stops, sometimes all you can do is stay afloat, even when the boat is sinking. The highway is different now. Emptier, slower. The usual rhythm of tires and engine has softened to a hush. You're no longer aboard the bustling machine of the history tour or the glowing, sterile sanctuary of Michael's peak years. This is the final ride. No sirens, no screaming fans, no pounding bass behind tinted glass. Just silence. Profound, undeniable. The kind that wraps around your ribs and sits with you. The bus is black today. No markings, no digital window loops, no lavender oil in the vents. Even the upholstery has been stripped down to its plainest version. The walls, once lined with softly padded leather, are bare. The calm views are off. The drawer labeled medical is empty. And in the center of it all, stillness. This isn't a tour stop. There's no set list waiting, no dancers backstage, no crowd counting down to his appearance. Just Los Angeles behind you and forest lawn ahead. This ride didn't have to happen in a bus. A limousine would have worked, a hearse. But his team made a choice, a quiet one. They chose the vehicle he trusted most, the one that carried him across time zones, flare-ups, meltdowns, ovations, the one that breathed when he couldn't. It's not just symbolic, it's correct. There's something poetic in how the world found out, all at once, that he was gone. As if the air itself had been holding its breath, waiting. And now, on this final trip through the city that made and broke him, the air finally lets go. Outside, people gather on sidewalks, holding photos, balloons, handmade signs. Some hold radios to their ears, as if the news might sound different through a familiar song. But none of them can see inside. They can't see that the light here is soft, that the air is still filtered, that the headrest on the seat where he used to nap is still intact, that the feather he once tucked into the dashboard, the one from his daughter's pillow, is still there, slightly frayed, untouched. You sit quietly across from the space he would have occupied. You imagine his fingers tapping against the armrest, his eyes watching the trees pass, his voice, soft and sleepy, murmuring something like, "Let's keep moving." And though he isn't here now, it feels like he is. In the memory of every sealed cabinet, every faint peppermint smell baked into the floor, every thread of fabric that once carried his exhaustion. Biographers still argue about how he should be remembered. The headlines wanted scandal, the fans wanted magic. The world couldn't agree. But this bus, this ride, it doesn't argue. It remembers. It holds no judgment, only motion. No interviews, only echoes. And as the wheels carry him through the city one last time, you can almost hear the whisper of old music threading through the silence. A bar of human nature, a hint of gone too soon. And then, you realize, this isn't the end of a tour. It's the closing of a circle. A man who lived his life in motion, finally at rest.